Hey, what up, my motherfucking people? How y'all doing? I had to take my little hiatus because of the things that I'm juggling. If anybody know, I just started school, I think a month ago. I'm in my 5th week right now. I'm halfway through the term. We do 8 weeks a term, and I'm in the middle of the week. I can't stay still. I don't know what that is. I don't know what still is. You know, sleep, I don't like sleep. I wish we didn't need it as humans, real talk. If I didn't have to sleep, bro, do you know what type of beast I'd be out here? Oh my God, y'all couldn't keep up. But anyway, let's get to the matter at hand. You're gonna hear a true crime story based straight out of Richmond, VA. And because we're going back to the 1960s, I couldn't find any archives on this case but what Google provided me with. No pictures, nor videos documenting this event, which intrigued me a little more, seeing how brutal and random these was, like just old newspaper clippings, court transcripts, and witness accounts. This story would be about the Penn brothers, Thomas Lee Penn and the older brother William Penn, responsible for multiple robberies/murders in the span of 6 weeks. And because no one has ever reported on this case during the 20th century, not even a YouTube video, everyone meet who I dubbed the stick-up killers. So without further ado, let's get into it. I go by D-Jack, but you can call me D. Call me D. Now, they were two white men raised up in Richmond, Virginia, inside the Henrico Churchill neighborhood located on the east end of the city. William born 1944 and Thomas born 1950. Now, we're coming up in a horrible time period to be black in America. I know this, you know this, we all know this. And by this time, several locations in Virginia were under court order to make separate educational facilities equal. So just 1 year after Thomas is born in 1951, black students at Robert R. Moulton High School staged a strike to protest the poor facilities at their school. This moment becoming a major goal of the civil rights movement as a whole. But depending on how old you were, that would determine how you viewed the city in general, black or white alike. So with that, it was almost a legal excuse to have hate in your eyes for the Penn brothers. There's no evidence to back up any racial bias teachings passed down to these two guys, but there was proof of a different type of hate. The environment around these boys was as traumatic as the family they descended from, becoming the product of a broken home, as their father would end up abandoning their mother for another woman when they were very young boys. You can say they were raised in a home where violence, discord, and insecurity prevailed over anything remotely positive, with family members being in and out of courts several times over, having more of the same domestic issues, making it known that all the Penn brothers' family members had a lot of run-ins with the law. The more erratic of the two, Thomas, he started showing early signs of behavioral issues wreaking havoc at home, school, and around his neighborhood. After being arrested by Richmond City Police for truancy at the age of 12 years old, 1962, Thomas Penn was confined to the Memorial Guidance Clinic, where he'd meet Dr. Lordy. Thomas was referred to the clinic for, as they say, being beyond parental control. And the authorities were concerned about his mental health, as they should. Thomas came to the clinic for psychiatric evaluation and for psychological examination, the technical terms. But in layman's terms, he came because they thought that boy was crazy as hell. Dr. Lordy himself told the courts Thomas was a paranoid schizophrenic. And this new revelation pushed the doctor to refer him to Central State Hospital for more studies and treatment. Upon his release, most of his early teen years was spent in foster homes and detention homes, while his older brother William, being the softer of the two, you'd be surprised to find out that he kind of acted like Thomas's protector, a follower but with his own mind, who's still attached to his more deviant younger brother. You follow me? So Thomas would eventually go back home years later, reuniting with his brother after his final release. But only after the next chain of events does the idea of him being back in regular society was not the best idea. Yeah, it's the year 1966. Richmond just broke into the springtime. If the weather was anything like it is today, it was the best time to visit the city. Even back in those days, you rarely hear about hurricanes and natural disasters slashing through homes and neighborhoods. Reason for that? We sit right below the Appalachian Mountains. So think of those mountains as like a safety net that filters out the severe side of a goddamn storm. So the whole Virginia's for Lovers State, Richmond known as the retirement town, or we're the most boring place on the East Coast. Trust me, us Virginians done heard it all. In the year that the Penn brothers would start their random spree, we still only recorded 39 homicides that year. Fast forward to today, just last year in 2023, there were still only 63 homicides reported in Richmond, Virginia. not even doubling that number of 1966. All those numbers and calculating just bring me to one sure point. Aside from the mid to late 90s, Richmond had always been a safe place to live, for the most part, you know? So when horrifying major events happen here, it's hard to forget. It's April 10th, 1966. The elder brother William had plans to link up with a girl he knew at Harrison Hotel. And while there, he ran into his brother Thomas between Clay and 2nd Street. He said he was going to make him some money that night. Now watching his brother walk up the street a little shorter ways, he entered a motel parking lot close by. William had no idea what he actually meant by making some money that night. It was nothing legal. But for a moment, he actually thought his brother was kidding, just playing around. So Thompson went inside the hotel lobby, William trailing behind. In a split second, there his little brother was, gun drawn, pointed toward a 78-year-old black man named Moselle Leon Spencer, a night clerk for the Eagleston Motel. William shocked at what his brother was doing. He begged him not to shoot. Moselle then gave this young stick-up kid some money that he pulled from his pockets. Now William, he thinking it's over. He turned to leave, but he saw Thompson with the gun, still up, backing Moselle into the office. Now, as Thomas moves around this wraparound counter to enter that room also, William took a chance at wrestling the gun away from him. Thompson pushed his brother back. William was already shook, felt he couldn't do nothing with him, so he ran out. A few steps outside the door, and he heard a gunshot. Bang! And before taking flight, after killing a man in cold blood, Thomas rips out the tray, holding the cash from the register. So, outside the motel, William, he in fight or flight mode, moving toward his original location. Now, reaching the hotel, he had seen Thomas on the next block, back on 2nd Street, where he originally saw him at. But him wanting to get out of Dodge, he told Big Bro he would meet him later and to keep his mouth shut. Now William, he leaving the scene in the car that he had originally rented to go to Lawrenceville, while Thomas sped off inside a vehicle that he had previously stolen. See the difference? So later that night on the south side of the city, William is back at home off of East 15th Street, Blackwell. Well, it's not Blackwell yet. At that time, it wouldn't be Blackwell until years later. And that's where Thomas shows up eventually to pay William his cut. And out of the money from the drawer and the money from Moselle's pockets, he gave him a measly $30. And again, told William to keep his mouth shut and don't say nothing about what he did. Now, if I must say so myself, I know today is 2024 and that's 1960 something. Somebody tell me in the comments, was $30 back then equivalent to, you would say, at least something today to be worth a robbery, a murder no less? I don't think nothing's worth a murder, but let me know. Back to the story. And now Thomas, he took a short drive to the 14th Street Bridge, also known today as the Mayo Bridge, where he tossed over that black tray from the motel, the black tray out of the register. Now Moselle, he was found on the 2nd floor landing of the motel where bloodstains tracked the floor toward his body. Thomas Lee Penn had officially started his killing spree, and he knew his older brother William didn't have the same heart as he did. He knew he wasn't the sharpest tool in the shed, and honestly, he felt like he was a liability. Anything could have happened while he wrestling the gun out of his own brother's hand. So the rest of his missions, they were done dolo, which brings us a week later back to the east end of the city. There was a man Thomas knew well and actually worked with named James Horace Carter, Sr., a 52-year-old white man from Sandston, Virginia, which is still the east end of Richmond. Now, James, who was leaving the supermarket, was approached by Thomas, and likely due to their previous relationship, Thomas was able to persuade James to drive him to an abandoned farmhouse. And this is where James would be shot 12 times in the stomach, back and head, leaving him inside some woods in a rural part of Henrico. But before leaving the scene, of course, he took from him $40 and all his personal belongings, the groceries that James had just bought, and his car, which he later burned. Now, after killing this man, he claimed another life sometime between the day and closer to the middle of the month. His name was Willie Sexton, a 21-year-old black man who lived on the 2800 block of East Broad Street. He was shot 9 times in the back and left floating in the Chickahominy River. If I'm saying that wrong, my bad. By this time, the case terrified people in the city. Because yes, clearly somebody was robbing every person they unalived, not really knowing if this was a serial killer or if it was a killing spree. There was no specific pattern to his victims. It wasn't race-based. There was no eerie messages left behind, so they weren't connected. Yet, this would be the longest gap in between these murders, with the next one taking place a whole entire 30 days before Thomas decided to hit another lick. Was it to hit a lick and he just kill him afterwards, or did he really want to kill him and he just might as well take the money while he did it? Who knows? But see, this lick took things well past a robbery gone wrong. On May 8th, 1966, a black teenage girl by the name of Cynthia Johnson was spending time with her boyfriend Oscar Henderson. Her and Oscar spent the whole day together, linking up around 2 or 3 p.m. till about 11:30 p.m. And at the time, the couple stood on 25th and Venable Street, having a cigarette before Cynthia would have to take her little walk back home. So Oscar, he gave her the rest of the pack of cigarettes, along with about 90 cents in change. And for unknown reasons, they got into a little heated argument. Following their argument, she left, going into the direction of 26th and Q Street. Now she made her way, cursing Oscar while talking to herself, not aware of Thompson, who had been watching them the entire time. Now Cynthia leaving was the green light for Thomas. He followed her down Q Street, caught up with her, asked her where she was going. She a little shaken up. She stared at this weirdo white man, noticing he wasn't that much older than her. And he was also wearing a pair of light gray dress pants and a light green Ballon shirt. I don't even know what a Ballon shirt is. So you can say his appearance calmed her suspicions a bit. So she then told him she on her way home. Thomas Penn, with all the bad of intentions, walked with her 1/2 block home. And this was the very moment he decided to draw his gun on this 16-year-old girl, telling her she had to go. Cynthia didn't resist at first, likely terrified of what he planned to do to her. But as she saw a man walking up the street towards them, she saw it as a chance to break loose. So the man that's walking toward them, he's seeing all this take place right now. So he started advancing a little more, wanting to help her. But after noticing Thomas was slinging some iron, he cut his losses and retreated in the opposite direction. So Thomas, not taking any chances for her to slip away, he took her inside the Armstrong Woods. The locals nicknamed this park Dead Man's Canyon. But the true and political correct name of this place is called Armstrong Redwood State Natural Reserve. It was established in the year 1938 and still up and running till this day. Like, I could go there right now if I wanted to, but I'm not going. So they get up to the tree line where the woods ended. Thomas once again had this black pearl handled pistol pointed towards Cynthia. Trying to stall him, she begs for mercy. Started talking about her stepfather beating her argument with her boyfriend that she still wanted to make amends with. But Cynthia wasn't pleading with a sound mind at this time. You know, a person of empathy, and didn't know she was never to make it out of Dead Man's Canyon, no matter what she said to Thomas. But he did respond, saying that God had called on her and that this was the best way out. No sooner after does he unload on this poor girl, throwing 9 shots in the process. Cynthia, while laying on her stomach, she asked Thomas for some air to breathe. After repeating himself, God called you home. God called you home. Weirdly enough, Thomas took off her coat, as if he was doing her one last favor before he left her alone to bleed to death. He made off with any identification she had on her, along with the 90 cents given to Cynthia by Oscar just a half hour ago. When Thomas got home, he got rid of the gun and burned anything identifying her. Later in the investigation, no one could figure out why he would do that though. Cynthia's face was known around the neighborhood. She attended school regularly, and she had both parents present inside the house. So a body ID wasn't the problem. You know, unless her parents had a sudden case of amnesia, there was no real reason to do so. Unless it was to get rid of evidence that the police could find. But that was debunked. If that were true, why take it in the first place, right? The only thing even remotely close to an answer is that Thomas was recreating ancient hostilities toward the world, which Thompson himself didn't understand. That very next day, May 10th, 1966, at around about 6:30 p.m., Cynthia Johnson's body was found by the park, laying face down, and her clothes had been torn with her coat just a few feet away from her body. The officers found no money or identification and came to a conclusion that out of 9 shots, she was only struck twice in the chest. The detective thought the clothes she had on were, and I quote, torn up rather severely, as if she had been engaged in a struggle. So of course the initial thoughts, she might have been sexually assaulted. And as heartbreaking as that would be, it's easier to pinpoint a sexual deviant than someone with a random thirst to fucking kill. So following these 4 murders, Thompson went into overdrive. No stopping, no breaks. It was one after the other until he was caught or dead. On May 21st, a 20-year-old white man, Addison Wilkins, had approached Thomas driving alongside him, who looked and seemed as normal as he was, but didn't know what darkness lay inside that man. He asked Thomas could he show him to Laburnum Avenue. Now for my Richmond people, y'all know Laburnum Avenue was on the east end of Richmond City. And back in those days, it was far more normal for two white men, strangers of each other, to ask one another for help without that thought of any devious motives. Thomas agreed. And inside another stolen automobile, he led Addison close to the Oakwood Cemetery, where he started complaining about car trouble. Now, Oakwood Cemetery is probably a 5-minute drive from where Addison wanted to go, but he would never make it. Getting out the car to check under the hood, lying about the accelerator acting up in his car. So afterwards, he opened Addison's door, telling him, "I'm going to send you to a resting place," shooting him twice in the chest right after. And just like the others, he ran his pockets, having only $11 inside. He took his 5th victim to a spot that had been recently excavated, feeling like it was fate that they would leave an open grave for Thomas to fill. Thomas then returned to East Broad, not far from Forest Hill Avenue, where he saw Malcolm Norman standing at the bus stop, and he offered him a ride to wherever he needed to go. "Wherever you need to go, I'll give you a ride," which was the Greyhound bus station. But instead, he took the same route to the same excavation he had just killed Addison 30 minutes before. And just like a goddamn rerun, required him to get in the car, got to the spot, shot him 9 times. Upon taking him to the hole, Malcolm jolted, grabbing Thomas by the chest and mumbled something. But Thomas, heartless, threw him right beside the other dead white man. And from both men, he stole their money, their belongings, and still at this point, you gotta wonder, did he really have a means to an end? Or was Thomas just having fun? The very next day, the events that unfolded struck deja vu in the minds of some investigators and those following the case. A 15-year-old black girl named Johnny Mae Hicks first saw Thomas Penn on May 22nd, 1966, near a friend's house at 2019 North 29th Street, which were the Mosby Court housing projects. The same ones still standing in Richmond till this day. It was close to 11 p.m. and she and her boyfriend had been fighting when Thomas walked up and told her that he was a detective. Now you may be wondering, what was a white man doing frolicking in the hood back in those days? But you also have to remember just how different those days were. There was no crack epidemic or hood heroes who protected a community just as they fucking destroyed it, of course. Nah. See, these were just poor black families off the heels of Jim Crow and segregation. A white man was still looked at as someone to be feared in the eyes of a lot of young black children. Thomas asked Johnny if the man, referring to her boyfriend, Eugene Willis, was bothering her. And she replied that he was, and that she was going to call the police, but Thomas told her that his mother had already called them. And at this point, the boyfriend Eugene went into the house to get a friend of his, a man named Purcell. Thomas took her hand and ran with her around the field, and when they got there, Willis and Purcell came out the house, climbed across the fence looking for him, but drawing his pistol, Thomas shot at Willis 3 times while running away afterwards. After all that, Willis, he walked Johnny home and left her at the door. Don't know why, don't know if they had a conversation or they talked about it. That's a pretty extreme situation to just leave your girl at the door. You know, like, you want to make sure she getting back to the story. And after that, Johnny, she reconsidered calling the police, and she had started walking toward the phone booth when she saw Thomas again on the side of what they called in the neighborhood the ice cream house. So Thomas, he walked with Johnny to the phone booth, but he convinced her that if she made that call, there'd be a lot of trouble. So they both went back to Johnny's house. By now, it isn't known if he was having a change of heart for the girl or just playing another sick game. But now, changing his mind, he suggested that she had to go back and call the police because her boyfriend Willis might come around and start some disturbance. Now look, don't get me wrong now. I understand it's the 60s and this is a young girl, but nah, bro, ain't no way. I'm sorry. But Willis clearly walked her home before leaving peacefully. Now, while going through this case, it hit me. Johnny didn't want to call the police on her boyfriend. She was trying to call the police on Thomas. A monkey could tell he wasn't who he said he was. But en route back to the phone booth, they saw a car slowly approaching them from behind, which they thought belonged to Willis. But if Willis walked her home, how the fuck is this possible? How? Why would that be Willis? Thomas suggested running around another way instead of going straight. And this way took them across the street inside of a field. And just as he told Cynthia a few weeks back before killing her, he said to Johnny, that she was going with him, ordering her to take off her clothes. While they are in the field, Thomas asked her if she read the newspaper and if she had read about Cynthia. Johnny replied yes, that she did indeed read about that. Thomas then said, I killed her and the two men in the cemetery, and that Cynthia had died in the darkness, but you would die in the light. The area that they were in is wooded, but it was lit up with street lights. Unlike Cynthia, he did sexually assault Johnny, shot her twice, and left her for dead. Johnny eventually regaining consciousness. She struggled to go find help that was already looking for her after they heard the gunshots, and it was her boyfriend Willis, taking her to safety, calling the police afterwards. Now she would be able to describe her attacker and the weapon he used later on in court, making her survival the one thing that single-handedly broke this case wide the fuck open. Warrants was issued for 18-year-old Thomas Penn, and William Penn was added to the suspect list the next day. And by May 29th, both men were in custody. Thomas Lee Penn, the younger of the two brothers, was seen as the main force behind all the killings, admitted his guilt and given a vivid description of several of the murders. The arrest of these two guys made national news after a 6-week killing spree in the east end of Richmond. Now, after all this back and forth to court and they get sentenced, which was life in prison without parole, Thomas was asked by his attorney, how many people did he really kill? And this was his response: 6 by myself. That was this year.
Talk, no comment though, just paper chase. Chasing my dreams, my nightmares ain't got no money. Just a cardboard sign and they existing so bummy. And they want me down with them at the bottom of the barrel. I don't want no parts of it. For that life I never settle, so I go all in that bit. Want all my pockets down. I'll be cool until I yoke the game and make them dig it out. They want me on the corner holding up cardboards, so I go extra hard on the hard flow. They want me on the corner holding up cardboards, so I go extra hard on the hard flow. They want me on the corner.